presenters will be sharing important findings from the annual review on a subject that has such critical implications for Pakistan's future development prospects. Before we formally begin, may I invite Ms. Mehak Ajaz on stage for the recitation.
And when it is said to them, do not cause corruption on the earth, they say, we are but reformers. Unquestionably, it is they who are the corrupters, but they perceive not. And when it is said to them, believe as the people have believed, they say, should we believe as the foolish have believed? Unquestionably, it is they who are the foolish, but they do not know it. And when they meet those who believe, they say, we believe. But when they are alone with their evil ones, they say, indeed, we are with you, we were only mockers. Allah mocks them and prolongs them in their transgression, they wander blindly. These are those who have purchased error for guidance, for their transaction have brought no profit to them, nor they were guided. Sadaqallahul Azim.
Jazakallah. Joining me on the podium this afternoon will be a distinguished panel of speakers and the lead contributors of the annual review, and I want to take some time to introduce them. Before I do that, however, I just want to inform that SPDC's patron, Mr. Moin Qureshi, and the chairman, Mr. Sattar Aziz, are both out of the country and therefore unable to join us. The vice chairman of the board, Dr. Hafiz Pasha, was supposed to join us this afternoon, but as he's unwell, unfortunately, he won't be able to join us as well. In his absence, Mr. Javed Jabbar has very kindly agreed to chair today's seminar. He needs no introduction. He's a renowned commentator and an analyst on national and international affairs. Mr. Javed Jabbar has served as a federal minister and as a senator for many years. He's presently a member of the SPDC board of directors. He's also founder of several grassroots development organizations, such as Ban Bailey, and actively involved in voluntary development work with organizations such as IUCN. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Javed Jabbar. With Ms. Javed Jabbar is Professor Dr. Khalda Oz. She's currently Managing Director of the SPDC. She's a former Chairperson, Department of International Relations, University of Karachi, and a former Director, Center of Excellence for Women's Studies. Dr. Oz has been involved in policy making, both with the federal and the provincial governments, and has an extensive teaching and research experience in the areas of foreign policy, development, and gender issues. Please welcome Professor Dr. Khalda Ross. Mr. Asif Iqbal. He's a principal economist at the SPDC. He's been associated with SPDC since its inception. He has a research experience of 15 years in the areas of governance issues, particularly related to social sector delivery and the civil society sector. Mr. Asif Iqbal. I'd like to now introduce the lead contributors of the annual review who worked with the SPDC team in bringing this report out. Mr. Harun Jamal, who's associated with SPDC as a technical advisor, with over 30 years of teaching and research experience in the fields of poverty, inequality, and regional development. He's worked on a number of research assignments for World Bank, ADB, UNDP, and the Government of Pakistan. Please welcome Mr. Harun Jamal. Ms. Ifatara. She's a principal economist at SPDC. She has over 12 years of research experience in the areas of regional and international trade, social sector improvement, and gender development issues. Ms. Ifatara has also worked on a number of research and consulting assignments for government, international donors, multinational, and national organizations. Please welcome Ms. Ifatara. Mr. Mohammed Sabir. He's also a principal economist at SPDC. He's worked on a number of research and consulting assignments in the fields of public finance, gender, and labor. Mr. Sabir has worked as a national expert on the Gender Responsive Budgeting Initiative of the Ministry of Finance, and has also quantified the gender wage discrimination in the labor market. Mr. Mohammed Sabir. Ms. Meher Noshirwani. She's associated with SPDC as a research consultant for the 2009-2010 annual review, and has previously worked on a gender study on public spending on education and health in Pakistan. She has over 25 years of research experience in the social sector with Shirkargah. Her areas of research interest are gender and environment. She's currently working as a research consultant on gender and environment. Please welcome Ms. Meher Noshirwani. Thank you to all our panelists for being here. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the members of the SPDC Board of Directors, Dr. Mazoor Ahmed, Mr. Rafiq Akhon, and Mr. Saeed Qureshi, who's flown in all the way from Islamabad to be here with us today. Thank you all for being here. I want to now invite Professor Dr. Khalda Ross, Managing Director of the SPDC, for the welcome address. This will be followed by her presentation on the annual review.
Not okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Only at that point did I do. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon. I'm indeed extremely thankful to each one of you to have taken out the time, in spite of the fact that it's a weekend, beginning of the weekend, and in spite of the fact the World Cup is going on. But this only shows the number is increasing, as I can see that the number of the people are there, keep coming in, that there is an interest on some of the core issues which are confronted both by the society of Pakistan as well as at the governmental level. So indeed, my deep appreciation to each one of you, particularly to my board members. My board members who are present over here are Mr. Saeed Qureshi, Mr. Rafiq Akhon, Mr. Javed Jabbar, who is presiding over here, and I think Mr. Mazoor Ahmed is on his way. So the ones who are not here, Mr. Sartaj Aziz, Dr. Hafiz Pasha. Let me state right at the beginning that my board members are extremely supportive and encouraging. Their presence over here means a lot to me. So thank you for being over here. I'm indeed also very thankful to the diplomatic community who is here, who has been able to take out some time from the very busy schedule. Let me say, gentlemen, it really means to us, because when you show interest on the issues which are confronted by Pakistan, And some of the issues, like the one which we would be addressing today, are the ones which would continue to haunt Pakistan in the coming years and the months also. So thank you for being here. I'm thankful to the media people also for having shown their interest to actually cover this event. They will be here and they are here in the large number. But let me also state that the presence does not only mean that our faces should be there on the electronic media. The intention is to take the message of the findings which have emanated from this report to the people by and large. And I think that is where they come to play their role. I'm also thankful to my main principal contributors and to my entire SPDC. If I start taking the names, it would take at least 10 minutes. But special thanks to the principal contributors who are there sitting in front of you. One of them, Ms. Nidat Sattar, is out of town, but we need not forget to mention her name also there. Then I need to mention the names of my other technical and non-technical staff for the pains that they have taken in organizing this event and also in translating some of the things. For example, the executive summary of the report, which you would be picking up on your way out, has already been translated into Urdu. Preparing the press release, I am indeed very thankful to each one of you. I'm also not forgetting my administrative staff, because without your help, I'm nothing. And back to back going for the launches of the study, it's a huge responsibility that we have committed. But doing it right on the time, let me say it, it wouldn't have been possible without the support of my board members and my own team who is sitting on the premises of SPDC, which is Social Policy Development Center. I think it would be extremely wrong on my part if I do not mention the financial support given and provided by IDRC, which is Canada-based, and of course the Norwegian Embassy of Pakistan, because they are supporting our gender research program. So my thanks, though the two sponsors are not here, the reason being that IDRC staff had to fly in from India, and coming in on such short notice is just not possible, but they are very well aware of what has happened and are a part of it, because the report has already been launched in Islamabad. So it has been sent to them via the email, whereas the Royal Norwegian Embassy was very much present over there in Islamabad. My sincere thanks to them for being there with us. The findings today, that much of it now, I'll come down to the report. The findings of the study would be shared collectively by two of us, one by me. I would be looking into chapter 1 and the chapters which come at the end of the report, whereas some of the remaining chapters would be, and the findings emanating from them would be shared with you by Mr. Asif Akbar, who is the senior principal economist at the Social Policy Development Center, besides being the secretary of the company. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's annual review, as you can see, it is on the social impact of the security crisis. The annual review 2009 and 10 looks into an issue which is of immediate concern, which requires your immediate concerns, and of course it is bothering each one of us. The report consists of some 8 chapters, including a complete conclusion based on the recommendations of this year's annual review. It undoubtedly presents a very comprehensive assessment of the impact of the security crisis on the social and the economic development of Pakistan, which is bothering all of us, and particularly the way that it is bothering the electronic media. It would be of much use to them. The report covers the various facets of the problems confronted both by the government and the society. The chapter looks into the regional and the domestic aspects. They also look into the macroeconomic implications of the emerging security crisis. It looks into the fiscal impact of the challenges confronted and the responses which have been identified, or the policies which have been initiated by the government, both by the federal and the provincial. followed by its implication for the social development. The economy of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, again, is very important. That is the province which has been most versely affected by the ongoing security crisis. But that does not mean that the other provinces are not affected. But for this particular report, we wanted to focus exclusively on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, dedicate one chapter to the economy of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. However, the remaining of the report will help give you an overall picture as to what has been its impact. Followed by the household welfare as to what is the impact of the security welfare on the household welfare and the civil society response, which is very crucial and very important. Next, Rizwan, where are you? Thank you. For chapter 1, I've just kept one table, and the chapter 1 basically and fundamentally contextualizes the security situation of Pakistan. The report begins by looking at the regional political development and its consequential repercussions, whether it is in the form of fallout or whether we keep on referring to the spillover effects for Pakistan, or whether we keep on talking about the impact of the drone attacks in actually deteriorating and aggravating the whole situation. However, it also looks into the internal dynamics of the problem, including the various attributes of the crisis confronted by Pakistan. This particular table helps in bringing forward the incidents of terrorism and the fatalities that have been caused in all the three categories. And here I'm referring particularly to the three categories of civilian, the security force personnel, and the terrorist incidents. In the post-9/11 situation, there have been the increase in all three of them, and also in the total number of the fatalities which have been caused. And as evident from that table, that is, except for the year 2005, I need some light on this side, please. I need some light on this side, please. Otherwise, I would have to keep on changing my glasses. I can't. Yes. It is not working. The reason is that I can't, I have a bad eyesight, so I need to, I can't keep switching my glasses. I'm sorry for this interruption, but as evident that except for 2005 and 2010, where we did see some decrease in it, throughout there has been an increase. Similarly, when you try to look at the suicide attacks and bomb attacks, you will see that the highest numbers have been recorded in the year 2007, with 678 attacks having taken place. Suicide attacks were highest again in the 2009 with 78 recorded. So these were basically the trends, the volume or the type of the escalation that was taking place. The number of the fatalities which have been caused can very clearly be seen in the total numbers which have been cited over there. In this increase in the incidence of the terrorism can clearly be attributed, according to me. You may differ on it. But this increase in the incidence of the terrorism and the changing type and the nature that we have seen can very clearly be attributed to the twin threats. That is, one, the external threats which have been there, commonly known as the transnational nature of the threats, and two, the escalation of the internal threats. We would be at some point, and we are soon after talking about the internal threats and as to in what way and in what manner that compounded or created further difficulties in actually looking into it. Next. This particular slide looks into the making of the problem. The chapter very clearly looks into the internal dynamics of it and the factors that contributed in the making of the problem domestically, that is within the Pakistan context. That this has been summarized in the following three. The three are number one, militancy, extremism, violence, intolerance. All three clearly have their roots embedded in the systemic failure of the institutions and the social and economic development policies. There are no two opinions about it. That has clearly come out of it. Number two, and I will be talking about them in slightly greater detail in a short while. The second factor which I have summarized and I thought I must mention during this presentation also is the emergence of the non-state group. This has been described by Bruce Rival as a force multiplier, and therefore there exists an immediate need to look into it as to what is the potential that they have in actually escalating it. But one thing clearly came which came out of it is that it caused the spiral process and it has strengthened the enemy syndrome. And these two seemingly are now the guiding principle of all actions and the responses from the two sides. When I say that it has the spiral process and it has strengthened the enemy syndrome, it doesn't actually end there. The report in its chapter 1 deals very extensively as to how this spiral process has been caused within Pakistan, which has generated fear or which has strengthened the enemy perception over here, which is guiding all actions and responses from the two sides. And the third one is the transformation of the conflict. And in my personal humble view, again may different, but this transformation of the conflict from the low-level threat to a high-level threat is clearly there, and it is being confronted by the government of Pakistan. Now, a little bit of the details on these three. Number one, next, Rizwan. Because I mentioned first that is militancy, extremism, violence, intolerance. That is, in short, the systemic failure of Pakistan, which has contributed in the failure, and which are one of the main causative factors for all of it. Particularly, as I said, it is a systemic failure of the respective governments in strengthening institutions, number one, creating employment, addressing the socio-economic disparity, ensuring quality education and healthcare, and guaranteeing the rule of law. I thought these are the four things which are the key, which are demanded by the people who live in that society. And in all these four very key fundamental areas, we have seen either the weakening, the decay, or the failure, and many a times we do refer to them or the situation faced by Pakistan as an ideal case of the soft state crisis. So much on this particular point. The failure is also evident in the trend seen in increasing inflation, because inflation is continuously growing higher, poverty, and the food insecurity, where almost half of the population, very clearly, without mincing my words, 48.6% of the population does not have an access to the sufficient food. And where you see the 60% of the population or of the people living on less than $2 a day. So that tells you a situation when I talk about the systematic failure. The second point which I mentioned was the emergence of the non-state group, something on which I've been working lately, but I will be very brief on this particular point. There is no doubt in my mind that the emergence of the non-state groups have made conflict management more daunting, whereby to many terrorism in Pakistan is more of a consequence of a foreign policy crisis, which can be largely characterized by threat. Where have you gone, Rizwan? You're showing a wrong slide. You need to come down to the first one, जहाँ पे मैंने 3 बयान किए थे, 1, 2, 3. But just stick to this one till such time that I tell you, okay? So the emergence have caused the conflict management more daunting, whereby to many terrorism in Pakistan is more a consequence of the foreign policy crisis, which can be largely characterized by threat, the nature of the threat confronted, leading to a situation, interestingly, and this is very interesting, it led to a situation where United States is seen both as a partner, within brackets at the governmental level, and an adversary, within brackets at a societal level. The second thing which I would like to mention at this point is, while Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and SWAT used violence and terror to force the government to comply with its demand. Now these two factors, that is a couple of years back, the emergence and the role played by the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan and the increasing role of the United States of America, these two phenomena together have led to the strengthening of the spiral process, which have strengthened the enemy syndrome and seemingly is now the guiding principle as stated earlier. The third but the last point which I would like to mention, and I think it is extremely important and it demands that we look into it, we probe into it more closely, more minutely. That is, one needs to understand the important attributes of the crisis which is confronted by Pakistan at this point. I would particularly refer, because I say this, we need to look into these attributes because a short while ago I said that the conflict has somehow graduated from being a low-level threat to posing a very high-level threat. And looking into these important attributes, I would just like to draw your attention towards 3 attributes. That is the system attribute, number 1. I'll just say a few things about it. Crisis attributes of the conflict and the actors attribute of the conflict. In the system attributes of the conflict, I would particularly like to mention the conditions in which the crisis unfolded. For example, instability in Afghanistan during the last 3 decades, the spillover effects, the so-called Talibanization, the so-called concept of the bandwagoning, was very visibly seen. So the conflict environment which existed within the region had its effect, and it took things towards a more serious situation. Apparently this transformation of the conflict has placed us in a position where today we do often think and consider it to be an unending conflict. For example, multiplication of the type and the nature of the conflict are vice versa. The type and the nature of the conflict have actually undergone a change, and also the number of the actors. In the report you'll see that the table number 2 clearly will draw your attention as to how the type and the nature of the conflict has changed from one position to the other to the third, and how it has compounded, how it has multiplied the number of the deaths that it has caused. Second attribute was the crisis attribute. And here in this second category, because I gave you 3 attributes, and in the category of the crisis attribute, without any doubt and with full sense of responsibility, I would say that this crisis attribute was pushed forward by the so-called why do I call it so-called? It was pushed forward by the Bush doctrine. The political and the economic